There is a kind of power that our culture does not know how to talk about. It is not the power of speed. It is not the power of relentless forward motion, of grinding, of showing up louder and more insistent than the day before. It is the power of stopping, of arriving, of planting your feet in ground that is actually yours and deciding that what you have in front of you is worth your full, unhurried attention. That kind of power is deeply uncomfortable for most people to claim. It feels like giving up. It feels like settling. It feels like the opposite of ambition. And yet, it is one of the most radical and transformative things a human being can do in a culture that has convinced itself that stillness is the same as surrender. March the 30th, 2026 is the day the cosmos demonstrates this exact kind of power. Not with noise, not with a collision or a clash or a sudden violent overturning of circumstances, but with the quiet, absolute arrival of Venus into Taurus, the sign she rules, the sign she was always meant to come home to, the sign where the philosophy of enough and the practice of truly receiving what is already present becomes not just accessible, but unavoidable. Something slows down today. And if you have been watching the sky for any length of time, if you have been paying attention to the particular quality of energy that has been coursing through the collective field over the past several weeks, you already know that this slowing is not a diminishment. It is an arrival. It is the moment after a long and turbulent journey where you finally sit down, exhale fully, and understand that the destination was not somewhere far ahead of you. It was this. It was here. It was the capacity to stop moving long enough to actually feel the ground beneath you. The sky on this date is not simple. It never is. But the story it is telling today has a clarity and a coherence to it that makes it unusually easy to read once you understand what you are looking at. Venus moving into Taurus is the headline, but the moon in Virgo forming a trine to that fresh Venus placement is the quiet counterpoint that gives the day its particular texture of both groundedness and discernment. And then there is everything that surrounds these two bodies, the sun moving through early Aries with Saturn close at hand, Mercury still finding its footing in Pisces after its long retrograde, Mars at 22 degrees of Pisces carrying the particular exhausted wisdom of someone who has swum a very long distance and is only now touching the other shore, Jupiter expanding everything it reaches in the early degrees of Cancer, Pluto at 8 degrees of Aquarius holding the deep structural transformation in its scales. All of this is the context. Venus and Taurus is the point. Stay with this, because what comes next matters for all 12 signs, and understanding the full shape of today's sky is the only way to understand what it is actually asking of each of them. Your birth chart holds answers that general astrology can only gesture toward. Every transit we discuss here, every planet, every degree, every aspect, lands differently depending on where it falls in your own natal map. A personal reading built from the exact moment and place of your birth goes further than any collective forecast can reach. It covers your sun, moon, and rising in full, decoded with care. It dives deep into the area of life most alive for you right now, whether that is love and relationships, career and abundance, or your spiritual unfolding. It maps the hidden karmic patterns running beneath your choices. It delivers a month-by-month forecast for 2026, not in generalities but mapped directly to your own chart. And it closes with a personal transmission about where you are and what your soul is preparing to step into. Delivered as an audio reading and a detailed written report to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is in the description below. To understand what it means for Venus to enter Taurus, it helps to first understand what Venus was doing in Aries, because no transit exists in isolation. Venus has been moving through Aries since early March, and Aries is, to be plain about it, not Venus's most comfortable environment. Aries is fire. It is impulse, initiation, the burning need to act before the moment passes. It is the part of desire that grabs, that reaches, that leaps across the gap between wanting and having, without checking whether the ground on the other side is solid. Venus in Aries is passionate, in the truest sense of the word. rooted in sensation and urgency rather than in patience and deliberation. It is exciting, it is often intoxicating. And it is, over time, exhausting. Because desire that never rests, desire that is always reaching rather than receiving, cannot actually take in what it wins. The moment something is obtained in Aries energy, the focus has already moved to the next thing, the next horizon, the next unresolved wanting. Over the past several weeks, many of you have felt this in the texture of your interior life. An urgency around relationships, around creative work, around money, around what you want and whether you are going to get it. A restlessness that would not fully quiet even in the hours when nothing urgent was happening. A tendency for desire to feel more like pressure than pleasure, for wanting to feel like a problem that needed solving, rather than a signal that was worth sitting with. Venus in Aries also passed through some of the most significant astrological weather of this early season, moving over Neptune and Saturn in their early degrees of Aries, which added complexity to the picture. Desires became entangled with illusions, and then with accountability. Love and value were first expanded into something almost mythologically beautiful, and then measured against the standard of what is actually real and what actually holds. It was clarifying. It was sometimes painful. It produced for many people a much more honest understanding of what they genuinely want versus what they have simply been habituated to wanting. Now Venus has completed that whole arc. She has moved through the full experience of desire under fire, and she steps today into Taurus, the earth sign she rules, the place where everything she governs, love, beauty, value, pleasure, the tangible and sensory richness of being alive in a physical body, in a physical world, becomes not something to pursue, but something to inhabit. Taurus does not chase. Taurus receives. Taurus builds. Taurus sits in the middle of a beautiful thing and lets it land fully rather than immediately moving toward the next one. And with Venus in Taurus for the weeks ahead, the entire collective field shifts toward this quality. The question stops being, what do I want, and becomes what do I actually have, and am I genuinely letting myself feel how good it is? This is the power the opening of this video was describing, the power of arrival. The power that belongs not to speed or acquisition, but to presence and receptivity. Venus in Taurus is not passive. Do not mistake earthly steadiness for inaction. It is the most grounded form of active engagement with what is real, what is beautiful, and what is worth building slowly and with full attention. The moon moved into Virgo today, and its position here is not incidental to the Venus ingress. It is the clarifying witness to it. The moon in Virgo and Venus in Taurus are both earth signs, and their trine aspect, that flowing 60-degree angle, creates one of the most practically useful and emotionally grounding configurations that the sky regularly produces. Earth trines do not feel like dramatic breakthroughs. They do not feel like revelations or initiations. They feel like clarity, like the relief of suddenly being able to see the room you are standing in without the distortion of fog or artificial light. Like looking at something you have been examining from too close and finally stepping back far enough to see its actual shape. Virgo is the sign of discernment, of practical wisdom, of the careful and caring attention that identifies what is genuinely working and what quietly needs adjustment. When the moon moves through Virgo, the collective emotional field becomes more analytical in the best sense of the word. Not cold, not detached, attentive. The moon in Virgo notices things. It registers the small details that carry large meaning. It reads the body's signals accurately, knows when fatigue is ordinary tiredness and when it is the body's way of asking for a more fundamental shift. It distinguishes between the stories we tell ourselves about our relationships and what is actually happening inside them. Today, with the moon in Virgo forming its Earth trine to Venus just entering Taurus, the specific gift on offer is this: you can see what actually has value in your life with unusual accuracy, not through the distorting lens of what you wish had value, or what you have convinced yourself should have value, or what other people have told you is valuable. Through the clear, grounded, body-level knowing of what actually feels good, what actually nourishes, what you would genuinely miss if it disappeared. Virgo does not traffic in sentimentality. It does not elevate things beyond their actual worth to protect feelings. But it also does not diminish what is genuinely good in a misguided attempt at objectivity. It simply sees clearly. And today, its clear seeing is turned toward everything Venus in Taurus governs. For every sign, this is an invitation to let the honest inventory happen. Not the dramatic sweeping assessment of everything wrong that needs to change, which is more of an Aries Scorpio energy, but the quiet, attentive, genuinely curious look at what is actually present. What relationships carry genuine warmth and mutual care? What word genuinely satisfies? What daily routines and habits are actually serving the body and the spirit? What you spend your money on that brings real pleasure versus what you spend it on from habit or anxiety? What you have been taking for granted because it has always been there. The moon will stay in Virgo for the next couple of days, and its presence here is a continued gift for anyone willing to use the energy consciously rather than simply feeling it as a low-level dissatisfaction with imperfection. Virgo's critical eye is always most useful when it is turned toward genuine improvement rather than toward the performance of self-criticism. And with Venus in Taurus as its trine partner today, the emphasis is not on what is wrong. It is on what is right, and whether you are actually allowing yourself to feel how right it is. If you were standing outside and looking at the sky today without any instruments, you would see a relatively ordinary late March afternoon. But the sky as an astrological map tells a different story. There is a significant concentration of planetary energy in Aries right now that provides the backdrop against which Venus's move into Taurus becomes even more meaningful. The Sun is at 8 degrees of Aries. Saturn is at 5 degrees of Aries. Neptune is at 2 degrees of Aries. These three planets, the luminary of conscious identity and will, the planet of structure and earned authority, and the planet of spiritual dissolution and transcendence, are all sharing the same fire sign. They are in close enough proximity to each other to form a functional stellium, a cluster of energy that saturates one sign and one area of life with a particular intensity and complexity. This Aries stellium is part of what made the past several weeks feel so charged. Saturn in Aries has been the dominant structural theme of this entire early season, asking all of us to be honest about what we are actually willing to begin, to discipline, to commit to building, even when the cost is real. The Sun's movement through Aries activates and illuminates that Saturnian demand, turning it from a background pressure into a foreground confrontation with the specific areas of life where avoidance has run its course. Neptune in early Aries adds a spiritual and sometimes confusing dimension, dissolving some of the rigid certainties that Saturn would otherwise enforce, which can feel disorienting, but which also allows for a kind of faith, forward initiation that pure Saturnian discipline alone does not produce. What the stellium means in the context of today is that the fire of initiation and identity still burns intensely. Aries season is fully alive. The pressure to begin, to act with courage and intention, to stop rehearsing and start building has not gone anywhere. But Venus has stepped out of that fire. She has moved into Earth, and in doing so she provides the crucial counterpoint to the Aries intensity, the reminder that all that fire, all that desire, all that urgency and courage and bold initiation needs somewhere to land, needs ground, needs the kind of patient, embodied sensory engagement with what is real that Taurus provides. The stellium in Aries creates the momentum. Venus in Taurus is the place that momentum is actually building toward. Together, these energies tell a complete story. You begin in fire. You gather your courage. You identify what you want. You feel the urgency and desire and drive of Aries season in all its intensity. And then you bring that clarity into Earth, into Taurus, into the long, patient, deeply pleasurable work of actually building the things you identified you wanted. Not in a rush, not in a blaze, but with the same care and steadiness that a skilled craftsperson brings to the making of something that is meant to last. Mercury is at 13 degrees of Pisces today, still moving through the final weeks of its extended stay in this sign before crossing into Aries in early April. Mercury in Pisces is a particular kind of intelligence. It is not the fast, analytical, categorizing intelligence of Gemini or the precise, discerning intelligence of Virgo. It is the intelligence of the deep, the kind that understands through feeling before it can articulate through language. The kind that picks up information from the space between words, from the emotional field beneath a conversation, from the symbolic and associative layers of experience that linear reasoning cannot fully access. Mercury retrograded in Pisces over the past several weeks, and that retrograde, which officially ended earlier in March, put many people through a period of internal review that had a distinctly Piscean quality. Not the concrete external life review that a Virgo Mercury retrograde tends to produce. An inner one. A revisiting of old emotional landscapes, of dreams and longings and half-formed spiritual intuitions, of the parts of the self that do not easily translate into actionable plans or clear statements. Mercury moved backward through the waters, and many people found themselves revisiting questions they thought they had answered, or feeling again the pull of things they thought they had released, or experiencing a kind of vague but persistent confusion about what they actually believe about themselves and about what is possible for them. That retrograde is complete. Mercury is now in its post-retrograde shadow, still in Pisces, still processing the inner discoveries of that backward journey, still integrating the things that surfaced in the deep water. This is a crucial phase in the Mercury cycle that often gets overlooked. The retrograde itself is the excavation. The post-shadow period is the integration, the time when what was uncovered gets assimilated into a new and more honest understanding. Mercury in Pisces is particularly suited to this work because it does not rush assimilation. It allows things to settle at their own pace, to find their proper place in the inner landscape without being forced into premature definition. What this means practically for today is that many people are carrying a new inner knowing that has not yet fully crystallized into words. An understanding of what they want from their emotional life, from their creative work, from their spiritual practice, from the quality of their intimate connections that arrive during the retrograde period, in the form of feelings and images and intuitive flashes rather than in the form of clear, articulate plans. Venus entering Taurus today is in a sense the meeting point between that Piscean inner knowing and the Taurian capacity to give it form, to plant it in the ground, to begin building the actual life that the inner knowing was pointing toward. The two are not in tension. They are complementary stages of the same process. You first understand what you want through feeling. Then you give what you want, the ban, gift of your patient, embodied, grounded attention. Today marks the handoff between those two stages. Mars is at 22 degrees of Pisces today, and if Mercury in Pisces represents the intelligence of the deep, Mars here represents the action of the deep. This is a placement that does not fully make sense to the part of the mind that equates action with visible, measurable, outward movement. Mars in Pisces acts invisibly. It exerts force through intention, through prayer, through creative surrender, through the willingness to move with the current of something larger than personal will rather than against it. It is not the warrior charging forward with a clear target in sight. It is the swimmer who has learned that fighting the ocean is less effective than learning to move within it. Many people have found the past several weeks energetically strange in a way that is difficult to explain. There has been the sense of things happening, of significant shifts occurring, of one chapter closing and another beginning, without the corresponding feeling of active doing or decisive action that usually accompanies major life changes. That strangeness is Mars in Pisces. The work has been real, the movement has been real. But it has been happening in the invisible register rather than the visible one, in dreams, in the gradual release of old resentments or old identities, in the slow, unhurried dissolution of attachments that have been kept alive more by habit and fear than by genuine desire, in the spiritual preparation that happens in the quiet interior before anything changes on the external surface. Mars will move into Aries in early April, and when it does, many people will feel a sudden surge of energy and drive and clarity of direction that makes the recent Piscean period feel in retrospect like exactly what it was, a gestation, a time of invisible preparation, not stagnation, not failure, not the absence of momentum, the gathering of it. In the context of Venus entering Taurus today, this Mars position confirms the larger theme. The most powerful things in this period are not the visible dramatic ones. They are the ones happening beneath the surface, in the quiet accumulation of intention and inner truth that eventually, inevitably, expresses itself in the form of a life that is genuinely and recognizably yours. Jupiter sits at 16 degrees of Cancer, and its presence here has been one of the most genuinely generous gifts of this astrological year. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of opportunity, of the philosophical and spiritual breadth that allows a human being to see their own life in the context of something larger and more meaningful than mere survival or success. In Cancer, that expansion turns specifically toward the emotional realm, toward home in the deepest sense of the word, toward the feeling of belonging, toward the ancestral and familial roots that shape who we are more than we often acknowledge, toward the capacity to be truly nurtured and to truly nurture in return. Jupiter in Cancer has been gently and consistently expanding the collective capacity for emotional honesty over the past several months. Not through confrontation, not through the kind of forced reckoning that Saturn specializes in. Through enlargement, through gradually making more room in the emotional body for things that were previously too large or too painful or too tender to be fully held. Old grief finding more space, old love finding new appreciation, old wounds finding the compassionate distance that allows them to be seen as teachers rather than only as damage. For Venus entering Taurus today, the Jupiter in Cancer backdrop is deeply relevant. Because Taurus values what is real, what is lasting, what genuinely nourishes rather than merely stimulates. And Jupiter in Cancer over these months has been preparing the emotional ground for exactly this kind of authentic appreciation. It has been expanding the capacity to receive care, to recognize genuine warmth, to value stability and loyalty and the particular sweetness of being truly known by someone who has stayed. When Venus arrives in Taurus today and begins asking the collective to slow down, to feel what is real, to tend with care and patience to what is genuinely valuable, Jupiter in Cancer is the expanded emotional container that makes that work possible. The ground has been prepared, the heart has been stretched. What Venus in Taurus now plants has unusually fertile soil to grow in. Every transit plays differently across the 12 signs of the zodiac, because every sign carries Venus's energy into a different house, a different life domain, a different set of questions and possibilities. What Venus entering Taurus opens for Aries is entirely different from what it opens for Scorpio. What the moon in Virgo witnesses in the life of a Gemini is a different conversation from what it illuminates for a Pisces. This is why sun sign astrology, while useful as a starting point, is always only a beginning. But the starting point matters. And for every sign today, there is a specific and concrete invitation worth understanding. For Aries, Venus moves into your second house of personal values, earned income, and material security. After weeks of Venus in your own sign amplifying desire and personal urgency, she now turns that energy toward the concrete question of worth. What do you actually value? Not in the abstract, but in the daily choices about how you spend your time, your money, your attention. The invitation for Aries today is to take one honest look at the gap, if there is one, between the values you espouse and the values you actually live. And then to begin, without drama and without self-judgment, closing that gap. For Taurus, Venus returns to your first house, your house of identity and self-expression, and this is your planetary ruler coming home to you directly. This is one of the most personally empowering transits available to any sign. Venus in your first house amplifies your natural magnetism, your capacity to attract what genuinely aligns with you, your embodied sense of your own worth. The invitation for Taurus in this period is to stop performing what you think others find valuable and to simply be, fully and without apology, the version of yourself that exists when no one is watching. That version is more magnetic than any performance could ever be. For Gemini, Venus moves through your 12th house, the house of the hidden, the interior, the things that exist below the surface of ordinary consciousness. This is a deeply private Venus transit, one that rewards solitude and interior exploration more than external relationship activity. The invitation for Gemini is to develop a more honest and caring relationship with the parts of yourself that you do not typically put on display. The wounds you carry quietly, the desires you have not yet admitted to yourself, the beauty that exists in your own inner life and has never been acknowledged. Venus in your 12th house is asking you to offer yourself the same quality of attention and appreciation you are so ready to offer others. For Cancer, Venus moves through your 11th house of community, friendships, and collective aspirations. With Jupiter already in your sign expanding your emotional world, Venus in Taurus here adds a particular warmth and stability to your experience of belonging. The invitation for Cancer is to look clearly at who is actually present in your community, who genuinely shows up, who offers the reliable warmth that Cancer's soul requires, and to invest your energy there rather than continuing to pour it toward connections that remain superficial by choice. You deserve people who stay. For Leo, Venus moves through your 10th house of career, public reputation, and long-term contribution. This is a transit that makes what you create and offer professionally more visually and aesthetically compelling, more genuinely attractive to the people whose recognition matters to you. But the deeper invitation for Leo is about integrity and visibility. Venus in your 10th house asks whether what you are building professionally actually reflects who you are, or whether you have been performing a version of your work that looks impressive but does not fully satisfy. The most powerful thing Leo can do during this transit is to let the authentic love for what they do become visible. For Virgo, with the moon in your own sign today forming a trine to Venus, this day has a particularly personal resonance. Venus moves through your 9th house of philosophy, belief, long-distance travel, and the expansion of your worldview. The invitation for Virgo is to loosen, gently and deliberately, the grip of the overly analytical on the experience of beauty and pleasure. Not everything valuable can be measured or optimized. Some of the most important things in a human life are precisely those that exceed any attempt at quantification. Venus in your 9th house is asking you to allow yourself to be moved by something bigger than can be categorized, to believe in something generous, to let your daily precision expand into occasional wonder. For Libra, Venus moves through your 8th house, the house of deep transformation, shared resources, and the intimate territories that are accessed only when genuine trust has been established. This is an intense and potentially very rich transit. Venus in your 8th house draws beauty and value out of the depths, invites a more honest and courageous engagement with the psychological and emotional landscapes you sometimes prefer to manage from a comfortable distance. The invitation for Libra is to move toward the depth rather than the surface in at least one significant relationship or creative endeavor. What is waiting in the water is worth the willingness to swim down to it. For Scorpio, Venus moves through your 7th house of partnerships, close relationships, and significant one-on-one connections. Venus in Taurus is technically in your opposing sign, which creates a productive tension. Your house of partnerships is being lit up by a quality of love that is steady, sensory, patient, and deeply present, rather than intense and transformational, which are the qualities you naturally gravitate toward. The invitation for Scorpio is to discover, over the weeks ahead, what it feels like to be truly at ease in a relationship. Not performing power or depth, simply resting in the pleasure of someone who is genuinely there and genuinely kind. For Sagittarius, Venus moves through your 6th house of daily routines, physical health, work rhythms, and the practical care of the body. The invitation here is both specific and profound. Venus in your 6th house asks you to apply Venusian care and aesthetic attention to the very ordinary architecture of your daily life. Not just to the big adventures and philosophical quests that excite you, but to the quiet texture of Tuesday morning, to the quality of your meals, to the amount of rest you allow yourself, to the space and beauty of where you work. Sagittarius tends to regard daily routine as something to escape from. Venus in Taurus is suggesting it might be something worth cultivating. For Capricorn, Venus moves through your 5th house of creativity, joy, children, romance, and the expression of the self through play and pleasure. For a sign that can sometimes treat even pleasure as a project to be managed, this is a particularly significant invitation. The question Venus in your 5th house is asking is almost embarrassingly simple. What do you actually enjoy? Not because it is productive or impressive or building toward something, but because it genuinely delights you. And when is the last time you gave yourself the unscheduled, unoptimized gift of pursuing that thing for no reason other than the fact that it is delicious to do? For Aquarius, Venus moves through your 4th house of home, family, roots, and the private inner life. With Pluto in your 1st house continuing its years-long work of fundamentally restructuring your identity, Venus transiting your 4th house offers a counterbalancing tenderness. The invitation for Aquarius is to allow the home, whether that is a physical space or the emotional sense of interior safety, to become a genuine sanctuary rather than simply a staging ground for the life you live externally. Beauty and care brought to your private world during this transit creates a stability that supports the larger transformation Pluto is asking of you. For Pisces, Venus moves through your 3rd house of communication, the immediate environment, siblings, and the daily exchange of ideas and information. Mercury is also in your sign, making the written and spoken expression of what you value and what you love, especially alive during this period. The invitation for Pisces is to give language to the beautiful things you experience inwardly and often do not share. To write, to speak your appreciation, to tell the people in your immediate world what you actually value about them. Venus in Taurus in your 3rd house rewards the willingness to say the beautiful thing out loud, rather than only feeling it silently. Standing on this date and looking at the weeks ahead, the astrological terrain that Venus in Taurus is entering into has a distinct character that is worth understanding. This is not a quiet or uneventful transit period. Venus will eventually move through her square to Pluto in Aquarius, which will bring some intensity to questions of power and transformation in love and values. She will form a sextile to Jupiter in Cancer, which will be one of the most emotionally generous and creatively fertile moments of the spring. And she will conjunct Uranus in Taurus as the transit closes, which will bring an unexpected and potentially liberating disruption to whatever has become too fixed or too comfortable in the Venus in Taurus experience. This arc, from today's quiet arrival in Taurus through the Plutonian test and the Jupiterian expansion and the Uranian disruption, is essentially the full course of any meaningful, creative, or relational endeavor. There is the beginning, which is what today offers, the settling in, the recognizing of what is present and valuable, the slow, pleasurable orientation to what is being built. Then there is the test, which Pluto will provide, the confrontation with anything that is not genuinely aligned with your values, the pressure that forces out whatever was merely tolerated rather than chosen. Then there is the expansion, which Jupiter will provide, the moment when what you have been patiently building reveals its actual scale, its actual beauty, its actual capacity to nourish more than you initially imagined. And then there is the renewal, which Uranus will provide, the disruption that prevents stagnation and keeps even the most grounded and stable Taurean values from hardening into mere habit. All of that is ahead. Today is the beginning of it. The first day of a Venus transit that will be one of the defining emotional and creative passages of this spring. And beginnings, as anyone who has paid careful attention to the astrological calendar knows, carry the seeds of everything that follows. Saturn in Aries will continue to provide the structural demands that make Venus in Taurus not merely pleasant, but actually useful. Because beauty without discipline is decoration, Pleasure without integrity is numbing. Venus in Taurus is most powerful when it operates in conversation with Saturn in Aries, when the slow building of genuine value is supported by the willingness to be honest about what is real and to do the actual work of maintaining what is worth maintaining. The two energies together, fire and earth, urgency and patience, discipline and pleasure, are the complete picture of what this season is asking for. There is a concept that Taurus understands at an almost cellular level that most of the rest of the zodiac and most of contemporary human culture finds genuinely difficult to embody. The concept of enough. Not enough as a limitation, not enough as the settling for less than you deserve, but enough as a genuine and embodied recognition that what is present, what is already here, what has already been built and tended and loved into existence, is worthy of your full attention and your genuine satisfaction. This is not a passive concept. It requires more courage in many ways than the relentless pursuit of more. Because when you stop accumulating and start receiving, when you put down the perpetual forward motion and let yourself actually feel the life you are standing in, you become responsible for your experience of it in a way that constant activity never requires. You can no longer deflect with busyness. You can no longer defer appreciation until some future condition is met. You are here now with what is actually present, and the question becomes simply, can you let this be enough? Can you let yourself feel how good this is? Venus in Taurus on March 30th, 2026 is asking this question of every sign, not in the abstract philosophical way that some astrological transits ask their questions, but in the most immediate and practical way possible. In the body, in the senses, in the small specific pleasures of a day, the food that is good, the light through the window in the late afternoon, the person who asked how you were and actually meant it, the thing you made with your hands that turned out better than you hoped, the song that arrived exactly when you needed it, the feeling of being in a room where you belong. The moon in Virgo witnesses these things with precise and loving attention. It notices, it appreciates. It does not inflate or sentimentalize. It simply sees clearly what is genuinely present and genuinely valuable. And in that clear seeing, it offers the most practical form of gratitude available. The gratitude that is not a performance, but a perception. The gratitude that does not wait for a reason to be grateful. The gratitude that is simply the correct response to an honest appraisal of what is actually here. Something slows down today. The velocity that has characterized the past several weeks, the urgency of Venus in Aries, the pressure of the Sun and Saturn in close company, the deep waters of Mercury and Mars moving through Pisces with their invisible currents of interior preparation, all of that begins to find its counterbalance in the steady, sensory, deeply present energy of Venus entering her own sign. And that slowing is not a loss. It is an arrival. It is the moment when movement transforms into inhabitation, when doing transforms into being, when the pursuit of what you want transforms into the genuine, full-bodied, unguarded reception of what is already yours. Pay attention to what your senses are offering you today. Pay attention to what your body finds good. Pay attention to what you have been moving past too quickly because you were busy being somewhere else in your head. The cosmos today is not asking you to do something spectacular. It is asking you to slow down enough to actually feel the particular and unrepeatable quality of being alive in this moment, on this day, in this life that is yours. That is the practice, that is the power, and it is more significant than it sounds. One of the things that gets lost in the urgency culture that Aries season always amplifies is the particular and irreplaceable beauty of things that take time, that deepen through repetition, that reveal their truest nature not in the first encounter but in the 10th and the 100th. Love is like this. Craft is like this. Deep friendship is like this. The relationship with your own creative work, with your spiritual practice, with the particular patch of earth or domestic space that you have made into something genuinely yours. These things do not reveal their full character quickly. They require the patient accumulation of days in their company before they give up what is most essential about them. Venus in Taurus has a specific relationship with this quality of revelation through time. The sign is not interested in the experience that peaks immediately and then fades. It is interested in the one that grows. The one that after a year of returning to it, you understand in a way that was not possible at the beginning. The one that has earned your trust, not through dramatic gestures, but through the quiet and consistent dailiness of showing up. This is relevant for today because the invitation of Venus entering Taurus is not only about what is already present and already good. It is also about what you are beginning to tend. What seeds are being planted in the soil of your life right now that will not reveal their full growth for weeks or months or years. Not every valuable thing is visible yet. Some of the most important things you are currently building are invisible to the people around you and sometimes to yourself. But the tending matters anyway. The attention matters. The patient daily return to the thing you love and care about and are slowly building, that is the Taurian work, and Venus in this sign honors it above almost anything else. The question to sit with as today moves into evening is not only what do I have that is good, but what am I beginning that is worth the long time it will take? What am I willing to give the seasons to, rather than the days? What is worth the kind of love that does not need to see immediate results because it trusts the process of growth itself? That question, asked in earnest under the slow and grounded and sensory sky of Venus in Taurus, tends to produce answers that carry unusual weight. Answers that do not feel like conclusions but like the beginning of a very long and very worthwhile conversation with the life you are actually living. The sky today is not asking for your transformation. You have had plenty of that in recent weeks. It is asking for something perhaps more difficult, your presence. Your full, unhurried, genuinely receptive presence in the body you are in the life you have, on this particular and unrepeatable day. Because that is the real portal, not the dramatic alignment or the threshold degree or the portal that opens and closes in a single afternoon. The portal that is always open is the one that asks whether you are actually here, whether you are actually feeling what is real, whether you are letting what is beautiful in your life actually land. Something slows down today. Let it. The slowing is the gift. The slowing is the power. And the world that becomes visible when you stop moving through it fast enough to feel it. That world has been here all along, waiting patiently, with the particular steadiness of everything that is built to last. If this message found you today and landed somewhere that felt true, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a word in the comments about what you are choosing to slow down for. Until next time, take good care of yourself and let the ground hold you.